This is Lightning Power Lunch, presented by Reef Rum on the Lightning Audio Network with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to come in practice and get a good practice and focus on the next game. Yeah, like I said, it's no excuse. We want to win every single time we go out there, yeah, we got to find ways, but we'll turn the page and move forward.
That is Yanni Gord. I'm Erik Erlendsson, filling in for Greg Linnelli. That's Dave Mishkin, the radio voice of the Tampa Bay Lightning, and that was Gord talking after what has been a rare loss for the Lightning over the past couple of weeks in the game against the New York Rangers the other night, a game in which, Dave, I added it up, they were missing, once Brandon Hagel left the lineup, 35% of their salary cap was out of that game. But as we know with this team, they don't make excuses, and they knew that they kind of stumbled out of the gate a little bit and didn't have their best start. I mean, it was rare. We saw John Cooper call a timeout in the opening couple of minutes of a game to kind of get the troops together a little bit, and it worked. But they got themselves into the hole and just couldn't kind of figure things out. And, you know, we should let people know, too, that we are taping this. So as the Lightning do practice on Friday before heading down to Sunrise for tomorrow's game against the Panthers, we don't yet have any injury updates on who's going to be on the ice and who might be in the lineup tomorrow and everything else. But that was an off night for the Lightning, and you have to hope that it's just an off night as the schedule's going to pick up here a little bit in the next little week or so.
Yeah, the injuries did not come at an ideal time for the Lightning, in that there were a bunch that happened all at once. That's why they were missing, if we include Nick Paul, who hasn't played all year, 6 regulars, and then they lost Hagel early in the game, so they were down a forward, but that's a 7th regular. We can include Dominic James as a regular at this point, I think, because if he's healthy, he's in.
Yeah.
And that part of it was not ideal. What actually worked to their benefit a little bit was that this has been a light week. I mean, they played Saturday against Washington, and then they had one game in the next 6, right? Yeah. So Wednesday was the one game during the mid part of the week. But now that we head into the weekend, the schedule is going to pick up again. So, you know, you keep your fingers crossed that it didn't sound like these injuries were going to be overly significant. We still don't know what the Hagel situation is, but as far as the updates for the other guys, many of them were in the day-to-day range or close to day-to-day. So hopefully they'll heal up and they'll get reinforcements. That was not ideal. To me, I mean, we talked about this, Greg and I did, on yesterday's show, of course, because it was the day after the game. But I do see a difference between the loss to the Rangers and some of the losses the Lightning had earlier in the year. And the biggest difference to me was in some of their early season losses, they just didn't play with enough urgency.
Yeah.
And that was a part of the equation, which is how they went, 10, 11, 12 minutes sometimes without a shot on net. We saw that early in the year. Excuse me. The Ranger game, they had high urgency. I mean, we saw that in how they battled back 3 times in the first period to turn a 2-goal deficit into a 1-goal deficit. But as we often, hear said, they may have worked hard. They didn't work smart. They took some penalties that were avoidable. They made some turnovers that were avoidable. They had some coverage issues that could have been tighter. So they have to own what they got. They had some bad breaks go against them too. But every one of those bad breaks that went against them came as they opened the door for the Rangers to maybe make a play. It was an odd man that went off a skate. It was a power play where they lost the face-off for the Rangers. They got a power play, but the penalty was avoidable. The one that went off Destu's stick, the Borgen goal, the guy's wide open in the high slot. He's in a fairly dangerous position to shoot after the Lightning failed to clear the zone. So, like most things in this sport, it's not just one thing. It was a combination of things. They didn't play well enough. But as Coop said afterward, he kind of focused on the positive, Erik. You were there. He talked about the compete and the work ethic, and all that is absolutely true. And it came from the guys who were kind of more in the bottom half of the lineup, if you will, whether you're talking about the guys who just came up from Syracuse or just depth players, they really, really dug in hard. And it was too much to overcome. Like, if you're going to give up 4 goals in the first period, you're going to have a makeshift lineup as it is, trying to find chemistry. You pull out Hagel, lines are in a blender. You almost have to like out battle the lack of synchronicity. And for a while they did that, but in the end it was just too much to overcome. So look, they pack up, get ready to go to Florida. Like Yanni said, next game is a new game. There's a lot of subplot to this game, but where we finished the show yesterday, Eric, was, anything that might happen in terms of these extra storylines. I think the most important thing for the Lightning and the Panthers, get 2 points.
Yeah.
You don't want to get caught up in all of this extra stuff at the expense of surrendering, points in the standings.
Yeah, absolutely. At the end of the day, there's a big difference between, the last 2 preseason games and then game number, it'll be 16 for Tampa Bay, 17, somewhere in that range. The Panthers are sort of the same spot on their schedule. And you look at the standings in the conference as a whole, let alone the Atlantic Division, a couple of slip ups here, all of a sudden you can go from a playoff spot to last in the conference, last in the division. So it is 2 very valuable points on it. But, we did circle November 15th for a reason because of what happened. And now with the injuries, right, Scott Sabourin is up, and he was at the central part of what took place in that game against the Panthers in the preseason finale. You've added Curtis Douglas to the lineup. So yeah, the 2 points are obviously what's at stake, but I think we can all agree that, we're all going to be sort of paying attention to how this game transpires. And, like Chief said it the other night, on the, I don't know if it was in one of the intermission hits or during the pregame hit. Sometimes we expect fireworks and we just get a hockey game.
Yeah,
right?
That's
Sometimes
true.
That happens.
Sometimes you're taking a number 2 for a later game.
Yeah, and these 2 teams will meet again in about a month here in Tampa at Benchmark International Arena. So, if it doesn't take place tomorrow, it doesn't take place that but there will be a lot of eyes on this game for a number of reasons, and especially the league. I'm sure the league has dialed up, both organizations and say, hey, look, we're keeping an eye on it. We'll see who they put on the game as the officials. That's always sort of an important thing to kind of keep an eye on, who they put on the ice to kind of officiate this game. But as we saw in the first preseason game, all it takes is one little spark right now between these 2 teams, and things can go off the rails in a hurry. So I'm interested to see who John Cooper starts in this game, who Paul Maurice counters with to start this game. That's going to maybe sort of set potentially a tone of how the game might go. Either way, we're all going to be glued in at 5:00 tomorrow night when the puck drops between these 2 teams, because we think we know what we could see, but we don't necessarily know how it's going to transpire.
So for the Panthers, Jonah Gadjevich, who is one of their tougher players, is out.
Yeah,
Greer isn't, and if anyone's going to be involved on the Panther side, I would think it's going to be Greer, just because he was involved in the altercation with Hagel.
Yep.
In the second to last preseason game. Now, he did fight Radish later in that game, but you have a feeling that chapter isn't completely closed as far as what the Lightning are thinking and feeling about Greer. But I mean, we don't even know yet if the Lightning are going to field a lineup with Sabourin and Douglas both dressing. I know Lightning fans are like, that's a foregone conclusion. Some of it is going to be tied to who is available, who is injured, and who is able to play. But I guess I'm wondering, so the Lightning called up Kachuk and Sabourin. They called up players because they had a need to call up players. I mean, the injuries that they have sustained are legitimate injuries. Do you think had they stayed healthy, we still would have seen Sabourin recalled in advance of this Florida game around the same time? So it wasn't quite so direct as we we, the Lightning, called him up like the day before the Florida game. They called him up a few days before the Florida game, and he played in a game and scored a goal. But if not for the injuries, do you think Sabourin would have been summoned from Syracuse?
Yeah, that's a great question. We know the roster situation the Lightning have, right? They've been basically at a full 23 for most of the year. There's only a couple of guys that don't require waivers to be reassigned, and Dominic James was one of those guys, right? And the way that he had been playing, would you sacrifice, putting a
Let me
James?
rephrase. If they had, let's say, one open roster spot.
Okay. All right.
So you're not having to move somebody off the roster. Let's say one of these guys, let's say McDonough is still going on IR. So you have the open roster spot.
I would say no, just because you have Curtis Douglas, right? And that's sort of what one of his roles is on the team. So I don't know if Sabourin would have been a guy that you would have recalled specifically for this, because as what happened in the preseason when they called up all those guys, including Sabourin, Roman Schmidt as well, ahead of that last preseason game, you sort of made your intentions pretty clear. If they'd have called up Sabourin specifically for this game, I think the intentions would have been clear. And the fact that we're sitting here right now saying, hey, we might actually just get a plain old hockey game tomorrow night, I don't know what the intentions are, right? Because Sabourin did come up and he scored a goal. At that time, it was a pretty key goal as well. Now, if assuming, Holmberg and Cirelli and those guys are not available for tomorrow, if they have to miss another game, we saw the line with Douglas, Finley, and Sabourin on it. I mean, that's a big line. 6'6" Jack Finley, who's not even the tallest guy on the line, with Curtis Douglas at 6'9", and Sabourin certainly got some muscle to his size. I don't think he would have been called up if there weren't this sort of window that did open up for them to make this happen. And, as people know, James and McDonough are on IR, so they're not eligible to come back until Sunday's game if they're even ready by that point. But, so those roster spots will still be available. So I think that, if you want to call it the hockey gods opened up a window of opportunity, maybe the hockey gods just opened up a window of opportunity for it to happen.
And to be clear, if Hagel is unable to play, the Lightning are going to have to play one of the players that was unable to play against the Rangers, or they're going to have to call up another player, which we haven't heard that news yet. We are pre-taping. The team is scheduled to practice in a little under 2 hours. Hopefully Hagel is okay. If he's not okay, you hope that one of the guys that was day-to-day at the forward position, or even Hedman, they could bring in Hedman as the seventh defenseman. But really, you're looking at Cirelli and Holmberg. One of those guys would be able to come back in.
Yeah, and I will say, in Hagel's part, he was handing out the first career point pucks in the locker room post game the other night to both Douglas and Finley, who picked up their first NHL points on the Sabourin goal. So he was in good spirits. That does not always mean anything. So we will see if he is on the ice and where he stands for tomorrow night. But yeah, the lineup should be interesting too. Because the other thing, do you think, as with all this subplot that's going on, I don't know if the Lightning are, for lack of a better term, have gotten their piece of Aaron Ekblad, right? Like Sabourin was a guy who went after Ekblad in the preseason game, and Ekblad didn't come back to that game, and that's what Sabourin got the 4-game suspension for. So certainly AJ Greer, we know, would be in the middle of anything, but is there a side story there too of because Ekblad was the one that took out Hagel in the playoffs last year? Are the Lightning done with Aaron Ekblad in that sense? Not that I'm suggesting headhunting or anything, but we know that this stuff, you take numbers and you remember. I think the Lightning still remember, and I don't think that they've felt, or they may not feel that Aaron Ekblad has answered.
He has not yet paid the toll.
Yes.
He has not yet paid the toll, which is what I was saying during those, really after the second preseason game, and even after the first preseason game in which Greer targeted Hagel. I was asking rhetorically, has Hagel not paid the toll yet in the Panthers' mind?
Yeah.
A hit that had Barkov actually touched the puck would have been no penalty.
Yep.
Look, he got a major. Hagel did. He got suspended. The Panthers felt that they needed to check a box for themselves. Hagel, after the series, said, if you wanted to check a box, basically asked me to fight. Ekblad didn't do that.
Yep.
So if you're Hagel and you're looking at what Hagel did have to pay, he missed the rest of game 2 when the Lightning were down. Surely they could have used him down 1-0 in game 2. He was not available for the second half of the third period in that game. They didn't have him at all in game 3, the game they won. And then he played a little over a period in game 4 before he took the elbow from Ekblad and missed the rest of the series. Got a concussion. That's going to be something he's going to have to carry with him the rest of his career. Yeah. We know that, the cumulative effect of concussions. So he paid a lot for a hit again. I feel like I've repeated myself a million times on this. He deserved the penalty, but it was a 5-minute major for interference. It wasn't a 5-minute major for hit to the head. It wasn't a 5-minute major for boarding. It was a clean check had Barkov had the puck.
Yep.
So he made a split-second decision. It was the wrong decision. Okay? What Ekblad did, because we had some questions about the Soucy hit on Hagel, which I thought was fine, just for the record. I don't know if you feel any differently.
No,
and what I said about the Soucy hit was compare the Soucy hit with the Ekblad hit. First of all, Soucy is 6'4", I guess. So, he's got a few inches on Hagel, and it's not his obligation to lower himself to hit somebody smaller. Like, he just has to deliver a check in a clean way, and he makes a body check, but his elbow is plastered to his rib cage. He doesn't lead with his elbow. Soucy, I'm talking about. Compare that with the Ekblad hit. Ekblad leads with his forearm, targets the head. So was what Sabourin did to Ekblad enough? When you consider what Hagel had to pay, has Ekblad paid enough? He didn't even get a penalty in the game, and he scored the tying goal later, which that's really water under the bridge. So you ask me, I would think that the toll that still needs to be paid by Ekblad would be Hagel's choice.
Yep.
If Hagel wants to fight Ekblad, and if Hagel is even able to play on Saturday, it kind of begs the question, should he be fighting after he took another blow that knocked him out of the game on Wednesday? The Greer situation is a little different because what Greer did was he took the match and lit the match.
Absolutely. Yep.
At the beginning of the second to last preseason game. Everything that followed, everything, all of it, can be placed at the skates of A.J. Greer because of what he decided to do. Yep. The first 7 minutes of that game, in terms of a nastiness component, it was a nothing burger. Nothing was going to happen in that game had Greer let Hagel go to the bench, unless something else might have happened later. But so Radish fought Greer, but Radish is not Douglas. Radish is not Sabourin. And the Lightning may feel that it wouldn't be Hagel coming at Greer. In other words, I think that may be a different player, but we'll see. They may be like, not tonight, but you're going to have to watch your back. At some point, it's coming. You're not going to know when it's coming. This is something that Brian talks about a lot in his day, where you're letting the player know that player will have to pay the toll, but that player is not going to know when the toll is going to come due.
Well, if you're the Lightning here too, so we already know the Hagel situation, and you get those concussions and they can accumulate pretty quickly. So not only did he take the hit from Soucy the other night, he took a pretty heavy hit from Tom Wilson on Saturday's game against the Capitals, and it wasn't a headshot, but he did take the stick to the face, and obviously he went to finish that game. But that was a pretty heavy hit, and he gets knocked into Logan Thompson in that play as well. So he's taken some heavy hits here over the last week, and even if he's questionable to play, do you play him?
Yeah,
Like if
that's
there's
good
a question whether or not.
I mean, do the Panthers feel he still needs to pay another toll?
Right,
You know?
right. Is he still going to be a target for them? Like that's I think that's something you have to kind of keep in the back of your mind too. Is so if it's anything on the fence about him being available to even play, do you just hold him out and say, well, look, this is a game with, maybe things could easily get out of hand. We know, going back to the Greer situation, one little spark. It's all it takes is one little spark to ignite this situation again.
That was more than a little spark, though, Eric.
Yeah, it was.
I mean,
I'm trying to downplay.
Had he not thrown 2 sucker punches and really connected with the second one and not knocked Hagel out of that game, it would not have escalated to the point that it escalated.
Correct.
Or the level that it escalated. And I'm just going to back up. Like, you may be right. It may not be. Somebody may go after Ekblad as well. We can't get inside the heads of the Lightning players, inside the room, what's being discussed, what somebody may decide to do to kind of do right by Hagel based on what happened in the playoffs last year. I'm sure if we talk to people on the Panther side, they'd be like, Ekblad took a huge check from Sabourin, got sucker punched by Sabourin, got thrown out of that game or left that game, even though he didn't miss any time afterward. That should be enough. Maybe that's how the Lightning feel about it. I have no idea. To me, it kind of feels like at this point, it's Hagel's option to say, you and I are going to settle this, meaning Ekblad, and we're going to do it dropping the gloves.
And I would hope if that's the case, if it is Hagel's 100% choice, I hope that's not tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. Just because of, the hit from Soucy, the hit from Wilson, you don't want him opening himself up to taking an unnecessary hit, having just went through those 2 games, Saturday and then Wednesday. Right. Mm-hmm. Because you do have, I mentioned, schedule's going to heavy up here, right? It's back-to-back Saturday, Sunday. And then it's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday,
it is very
Monday,
busy.
Wednesday, Saturday, Sunday, or Friday, Saturday coming out of Thanksgiving. I mean, it's a very busy schedule. And Brandon Hagel's on a heater right now, right?
Yeah.
Like he's 7 goals in 7 games before the game on Wednesday when he only took 3 shifts. He's been a very important part of this sort of resurgence from the slow start. And he's an important player. You need him on the ice. You want him on the ice. So do you want him putting himself into a situation, because he is an emotional player. He plays with his heart on his sleeve. Do you want that emotion taking him over in a game that's already going to have a very emotional undertone that could very easily swell up. Mm-hmm. Right. So I would even consider maybe not even, putting Hagel in this game for those considerations, depending on who else is healthy and who's available to play. I would consider, Brandon, let's just take a game. If you feel you need to do it, let's look at December when it's here on home ice. And then, the Lightning control, the matchup situation and could put him on the ice if they wanted to in a certain situation, if that's what he wants to do. So I would strongly consider holding Brandon Hagel out.
Well, we'll see. I mean, it may be out of his hands if he's not cleared to play.
Correct.
And again, we'll get some indication as to who is available when they practice later today. It's interesting, when the Panthers acquired Marchand at the deadline last year, along with Seth Jones, and I felt the Jones pickup was a great pickup. I mean, there was never any question that Jones would help their team. And also Ekblad was out, remember, because he got suspended.
Yep.
Right. So they needed a right-handed defenseman, and Jones slotted in perfectly. And he's still in the prime of his career. Seeing Marchand in Boston, especially last year, I was wondering if kind of the tread was starting to come off the tires a little bit. Understanding like he's still when he was in Boston last year, a very smart, savvy player, but just not being the same impactful guy that he had been prior. So I was just wondering when they acquired him, like, what does he have left in the tank? It turned out he had a lot left in the tank. Yeah. Tremendous amount left in the tank, because he arguably was the Conn Smythe winner last year. They gave it to Bennett. Hard to argue with that. Bennett had a great playoff too, but Marchand was arguably maybe their most impactful offensive player in terms of big goals, and certainly one of their best players in the playoffs. So I'm like, all right, well, he definitely conjured up 2 great months, but where are they going to be moving forward with him? And they signed him to the long extension. And look, I got to give the guy his props, because checking their roster this year and their stats at the start of the year without Barkov, without Tkachuk, dealing with everything that they're dealing with all of the long runs through the playoffs, he hasn't had that. He's just had one long run in the playoffs. He's got 20 points in 16 games. He's got 11 goals and 9 assists. Now, Reinhart, who's kind of like a goal-scoring machine, has 10 goals, but he only has 12 points. So, you could make the argument that Marchand maybe has been Florida's most valuable player this year to help them stay in the mix. Because it's not like no team in the East has really run away with it, particularly in the Atlantic Division. Some of the teams that started really well are starting to lose a little bit, like Montreal. Boston's been hot, cold. But every team has kind of needed to at least hang in there, and the Panthers have been one of those teams. And I think they owe a lot of it to Marchand, who just hit 1,000 points, by the way, last night. I'm not sure if we're going to have the ceremony before the game tomorrow, if they can turn that around so quickly. But look, I mean, another great pickup by Bill Zito. I mean, there's no question. And he has been valuable to them just in the first month this year, based on what he's been able to do for them.
Yeah, maybe Ponce de Leon actually discovered the fountain of youth and sunrise.
Yeah, maybe
out
so.
of St. Augustine, because he's been rejuvenated, right? There's no doubt, and I think we see that sometimes with players who, everybody kind of saw the direction the Bruins were heading, even though they've had a pretty good first month and a half to the start of this season, surprising month and a half to the start of this season after the way they finished last year, but When players like Marchand, who's had success and won cups and, been a big part of what the Bruins were for a decade, they kind of find that new home, which probably a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, how can Marchand fit in with his history with Sam Bennett going back to the previous year's playoffs and everything else? But he's been a perfect fit for them. He's been a professional. That's the one thing, we see the Brad Marchand and some of the antics he had certainly in the earlier part of his career. Mm-hmm. But I remember when the All-Star game was here in 2018 and John Cooper was the coach of the Eastern Conference and Marchand was on that team, and he had a line that said, man, he came in here, I wanted to hate that guy. I wanted to hate Brad Marchand, and I couldn't do it because he's such a nice guy. I think that's the genuine thing with a guy like Marchand, is that he has some of that on-ice reputation, which he's earned.
Cleaned up. He's cleaned up a lot of his on-ice antics too. Now that he's become kind of a seasoned veteran.
Yeah,
and as it relates to Bennett,
last year too.
As it relates to Bennett, they were teammates on the Four Nations. We touched on that a little bit yesterday. Yeah. As it related to Hagel, Hagel was a teammate of Bennett's, teammate of Marchand's at the Four Nations. They won that championship together. And when it came time for the teams to meet in the playoffs, the Lightning Panthers, that didn't matter at all. No. Nor did it matter to Matthew Tkachuk to hit Gensel at the end of Game 3. They were teammates on Team USA. Yeah. So that's just the way it is in hockey.
Yeah. And for Marchand to kind of fit into that locker room that that they've created down there. And then you look like the gesture he had earlier this month where he took a short little absence from the team for a couple of days to go help out a friend of his team, a youth team, after he passed away. He was given the grant. I mean, you just see the genuineness of a player like him off the ice. And I think that's why he can integrate himself pretty quickly, because I think behind the scenes, he's very likable. He's earned the nickname The Rat. I think he embraces the nickname The Rat. They still throw rats at him as they come off the ice after wins on home ice down there. But he is. And I think he's been rejuvenated. I think he's found a good fit, at the end of his career. And, that third line last year in the playoffs, It's a big reason why the Lightning weren't able to advance, is because of the play of Marchand and that third line against the Panthers. And it's but I think you also have to give credit to the Panthers here, because you lose Barkov pretty early in training camp, and you realize you're going to be without him for at least the entire regular season. Kachuk is already out. They lose Kulikov, right, to the injury.
Yep,
he's going to be out a few months as well. I mean, they've had some major injuries, which isn't necessarily a surprise. You make 3 long runs, we know firsthand, seeing it, the toll that it can take. And they have found a way to hang in. The Bobrovsky's had some great games that's kind of kept them in some of these games. And, sometimes you just have to find ways to munch points and stay afloat. And I think the Panthers have been able to do that because I think of some of their leadership and everything else. So you have to have talent. There's no doubt about it. But, their leadership has kind of helped them play. And having said that, let's hope the Lightning take their 2 points tomorrow night.
Hey, speaking of provocative figures in hockey, I wanted to get your thoughts on Larry Brooks, who passed away. To me, it was unexpected. I had no idea that he was ill. Apparently, John Tortorella did know, because I read that Tortorella called and spoke to the family a few days before Larry Brooks passed away. You knew him better than I did. I mean, I just saw him in passing and remembered some famous blow-ups with Tortorella, including when Tortorella was the head coach of the Lightning. But what are your memories of Larry Brooks and your interactions with him?
Yeah, well, he took a step away a few weeks. He was started the season still working, right? So when he took a step back a few weeks ago, you're like, wow, that's kind of unusual for Larry to kind of take a step back. But I can't say I knew him well. Certainly I had plenty of interactions with him through the years. The thing that I always appreciated about Larry is you couldn't intimidate him. Torts tried. You could not intimidate him. He was strong in his conviction, and if he wrote something, he knew it. He wasn't one of those, you think of the Post and some of the stuff that sometimes the Post puts out there. Anything Larry wrote, you knew was genuine. It was true. It was accurate. It was backed up with sources, facts, everything else. I mean, he was an old school newspaper reporter, a must read, and he was a presence on that beat for a number of years. And I remember the one in the playoff series against the Devils, right?
We were talking about that
2007.
yesterday.
Yeah. Right in the middle of all of that, right? It was a post game. And, Torts had the famous line, "We know what we did. We know what we did. We know what we did." And Brooks wouldn't back down. "What'd you do?" "We know what we did." "Well, what'd you do?" Right. And there's that whole back and forth. And if anybody's seen the YouTube video, I'm the one who asked Torts the question, because that was the game that Fedotenko dressed and never played. He never got on the ice in that game. So it was like this one little question in between the back and forth between Torts and Larry Brooks. And there were a couple of F-bombs, and I think that was the last time John Tortorella was ever live on CBC post-game, in a live post-game press conference. But the funny thing is, and this is, you mentioned Torts called Brooksy, down the hallway, 10, 15 minutes later, they're just chatting. Right, like nothing had happened, and and I think that was just because obviously Torts had spent a little time in Buffalo, and Brooks was around, and everybody knew Larry Brooks.
And Torts had been briefly the Rangers head coach too.
Yeah,
very briefly, but he'd been with the Rangers, and then of course he came back after his stint with the Lightning and was the coach there, and dealt with Brooks on a daily basis.
And that's when a lot of the. Were you bullied as a kid, I think was a line that Torts used against him. And, but like, I think that's the one thing that is such a sign of respect, is that you can have that sort of interaction between two guys and they understand it's not personal. It's just part of it, even though it felt personal and it sounded personal, especially with Torts. It was never personal. It was always heat in the moment type situations, but that they could kind of go and just chat and just, talk and in those situations. So, it's certainly, the media industry on the written side, whether you want to call it web, newspaper, obviously the Post still prints, Larry Brooks was a giant, and he is in the Hall of Fame for a reason. And you always knew when you were around him and what he did. I mean, just look at, some of the comments from Henrik Lundqvist, right, that he put out on his social media feed. And, Marty Biron, who was the backup there in New York for a while, sort of said the same thing. I mean, whether you agreed with Larry, what he wrote, or how he went about his business or anything else, you had a tremendous amount of respect for him. And I think that's going to be missed. It's, his Sunday Notes column were among the best. They were must reads, even going back to, the 80s and the 90s when, sort of newspapers were still at their height. So yeah, it's a very sad day to learn that we lost Larry Brooks. And, Molly Walker, who's the Rangers beat reporter now for the Post, they had a very strong bond and a very strong relationship. And, Larry was a great mentor to her as she came in and took over what is a very high profile beat. And, to see the interactions with them and everything else, it's tough when we lose these big names in our industry. And Larry Brooks was among the biggest.
Yeah. Well put.
Yeah. So I just to kind of change the subject before I get too teary.
Well, I wanted to get your thoughts on it because we hadn't had a chance to chat since the news broke.
Yeah. I appreciate you giving me that opening to kind of talk about it. I've had this question kind of pop up on some of the stuff that I've written and everything else. Are you worried about Braden Point? Right, he's only got 1 point in the last 6 or 7 games. It was a great goal that he scored in Colorado. We've seen a couple of other attack mode, I like to call them, Braden Point situations here of late, but he's not putting points up. We're 15, 16 games into the season. He's even taken some heat from Canadian writers because he's already been one of the guys named to the Olympic team. How much does Braden Point need to kind of find his point producing game? Is that a concern for you?
Well, in the short term, it's a concern just because I think the Lightning really need him to look like himself to give them more of an offensive boost. They've had some games where they've scored, 4, 5, 6 goals. I think that they've really turned things around, though, Eric, and going 7-2 in the last 9. Obviously, we can kind of forget about the last game, but 7-1 in the 8 games prior to the Ranger game, defending. I mean, they'd moved into the top 10 of the defensive stats. They may have fallen out after the game against the Rangers. I haven't checked. But, the power play really still hasn't gotten going, and Point is a big part of that. And they've not gotten a lot of production other than from, I should rephrase, Gensel, Cirelli, and Hagel have produced.
Yes.
I'm not sure that Point and Kucherov have produced at the level that they're accustomed to or we're accustomed to seeing them at. That is the short-term view. Is there some big overarching concern on my end? Not really, because I don't think that you have a guy who's regularly popping in 30 to 40, sometimes 50 goals a year with great regularity, all of a sudden just unable to score. So I believe that this is a confidence issue, which is funny to talk about because these are the best of the best. But I know you have mentioned often conversations you have with Stamkos about how important confidence can be to somebody who's used to scoring goals and producing points. And where I'm seeing that is he's not even really getting chances. So that's the other tried and true expression. Players in slumps are well, I'm not scoring, but at least I'm getting my chances. I think we'd be hard pressed to say that Braden Point has even gotten a lot of chances recently. So he definitely needs to find a way to break out of this. And I don't believe I can remember a time that he has ever at the NHL level been in a slump like this, with one exception. That was when he first came to the NHL. But the difference then, because it took him a while to score his first goal, the difference then, it was kind of like James. he was getting chance after chance after chance after chance, and it just wasn't going in. He was extremely unlucky. I don't think he's been unlucky here. I think that things have dried up for him.
Yep.
And he has to find a way to put himself in a position to start generating chances. Some of this is tied to the power play. And there's no question he has no room out there. None.
Smothered. He is smothered.
If they have him in the bumper, that is priority 1, 2, and 3 for the penalty kill unit. Like, we are taking away that pass to the bumper. And if Kucherov or whomever, Gensel sometimes, if they can get it to point and actually get the puck onto his stick, he's got a swarm of defenders around him. It's very hard for him to really get a shot off. Think about the power play goal that he scored. It was a tip. I mean, it wasn't like they tried to get him the puck. He positioned himself. That was in Washington. He tipped a Hedman shot in. So if the Lightning can start scoring the power play in other areas, I think that will open things up a little bit more for Point. But 5-on-5, I think that, he has to find a way to do more. And the last thing I'll say is, and I don't know that we've ever heard, top goal scorers say this, but I remember Gord said it when Gord was in a long goal slump, which I think was in the 1920 season.
Yep.
He went 40-plus games without a goal. He's like, I just stopped worrying about it and just like focused on defending or something. He said something to the effect of like, I just focused on the other parts of my game and stopped putting pressure on myself to score, and then it kind of opened up for him. So I don't know if that would benefit Point as well, because he's not scoring, but also he's got the worst minus on the team. It's not all on him, but who knows? Maybe he looks at that and it's like, I'm not going to worry about, if he is worried about it, but let me get my minus up. Let me get out of double digits here, and no matter what else happens, the other team is not scoring when I'm on the ice. Maybe that's a sort of mentality. I'm not saying he needs to do that, but that's what we've heard from other players who are used to scoring and they're in a slump and things are just not happening for them. So they almost shift their attention to other parts of their game. That's my take. I don't know how you've answered the question that you've gotten from followers.
I don't think I've ever directly answered it. But back to the power play situation with him, obviously he's got no space to get that shot off. How much of that would open up, do you think, if they could get Bjorkstrand to score one or two, right?
He had 17 shot attempts. Yeah. And a lot came on the power play. Yeah. So look, in his defense, and he's taken some flack too.
Yeah.
For Bjorkstrand, he's a different player than Point. Point does a lot of things to create opportunities for himself with his speed. Bjorkstrand has, I think, one of the best wrist shots in the NHL, but he is also not really inclined to shoot if he can't get the puck to the net. So it's kind of like, in order for B to happen, notably shooting the puck, A has to happen first, which is be in a position to shoot the puck. And he joined me after the Vegas game, which I think was his best offensive game of the year. He had 2 assists and very active, even more so than the Ranger game where he had all these shot attempts. And he said, for me, a lot of it is moving my feet. And, you hear that from players, but, if you're moving your feet, hopefully you're putting yourself in a position to get open to shoot. So what I will say in his defense, he has 1 goal. It was the first goal of the year that the Lightning scored way back in the first period of the first game in the first couple of minutes. He has not scored a goal since. He needs to get in a position to use his greatest strength, which is his shot. Some of that might happen on the power play.
Yep.
I will say 2 things in his defense. First of all, I have talked to him. I said, in other years with other teams, when you were on the power play, where did you play? He's like, bumper, right circle. Yep. He is one of the rare guys, and I will say rare guys in the NHL, who can score on a wrist shot on a strong side at a very difficult angle. We saw him do it with Columbus against the Lightning. He's a righty shot. He can be on the right side of the ice, almost against the boards. His wrist shot is good enough. He can put it in the short side upper corner. So other teams used him there. Well, who's there for the Lightning? Kucherov.
Yeah.
Like they're not gonna put. They actually had Bjorkstrand there when he was on the second unit briefly. He was there at the beginning of that Vegas game and had a couple of opportunities to shoot. So putting him at the left circle is a new position for him. Okay. And so that is one thing I will say in his defense. And the second thing is he has not been on the top unit throughout the year.
Right.
So it feels like now they are kind of committing for now to putting him there. And I actually, even though he didn't score, I like the fact that he was looking to shoot aggressively on that power play in the Ranger game. So kind of the same with Point from this standpoint. I think if pucks start to go in for him, we'll see more go in. It's almost like the snowball will start rolling down the hill. And your question about what would that do for Point, it would do a lot for Point, because now the penalty kill unit has to be aware of the threat elsewhere. And maybe it's not even a pass to Point. Maybe it's a shot and a rebound that comes to Point if he's standing in front.
Yeah,
I think too is that like just looking to shoot sometimes may help. I mean, whether it's Hedman or Radish or Destu, who's been on the power play a little bit, like if that defenseman at the point is trying to get pucks to the net, that could open things up for Point. Maybe he tips it in like he did in Washington. Maybe it's a rebound. The best chance he had on the power play, other than the goal that he scored in Washington, came in Utah, where Lightning won the draw. He won the draw. Hedman took an immediate shot, and the Lightning got 3 grade A's on rebounds. Point had 2 of them. I know you remember that sequence. And Vejmelka made 2 unreal saves on Point and then stopped Hagel as well. So it doesn't have to be we must get the point. We must get the puck to Point in the bumper for his shot. There are other ways to go that, you know, if he's in that spot, that's a dangerous area on the ice. The puck may come to him indirectly. So that could help him too.
Yeah, you know, that's one thing we've talked about too, you know, post-game, me and Chief with Greg. Whoever's at the point, like if they're more of a shot, look, whoever's back there is going to be a shot threat. But to be more active in shooting from that area is like you look at the Vegas game when Radish was put there, all of a sudden he starts firing pucks. I think it did open up other areas, right? I think there's sometimes when the power play struggles, they try too hard to go through Kucherov. When, you know, things would open up for Cooch if other guys were being a little bit more selfish, so to speak, right? Radish was shooting the puck, opened things up. You know, the power play goal against the Capitals, Hedman shot the puck, goes in off of Gensel, right? Those type of, like, I think everything runs through Cooch, but I think things open up if other guys do what they're expected to do on a more consistent basis. Right. And I think that's why that was so important, even though he didn't score, for them to keep trying to feed Bjorkstrand during that. It was a 6-on-4 and then the 6-on-5 towards the end of the game against the Rangers the other night to get him feeling good about his game and to open that up. Right. Because if he can start being a guy who can consistently score now, as you mentioned, other teams have to pay attention to that maybe a little bit more. Maybe that spreads out that slot area, and because we know Braden Point doesn't need much space to get that shot off. It's such a quick release, you know, and especially when he's got his radar on. So all it takes is just a little bit of spreading out of the defenders in that slot area, and so like it's there's a lot of moving parts kind of going on in what the Lightning are trying to do to kind of get out of this power play funk a little bit because. You know, they've been able to win despite not scoring consistently on the power play, and that's a good sign. But at some point, you have to make it something that other teams fear a little bit more, as it has for the past, you know, handful of years. When if you put the light on the power play, you knew there was a good chance that you probably weren't going to be able to escape it, and the Lightning were going to get a goal. And this
is probably a very good segue into tomorrow night's game, because. Again, going into a game, we don't know how many power play chances the Lightning are going to get. But assuming they get at least one, this is the team that really flummoxed them last year, both in the playoffs and in the regular season. Where the Lightning 2 for 18 or whatever it was in the
I think that's the correct number
in the series, but they were the same in the 4-game regular season. So I'm curious. I don't know if it's going to happen, and this is a different look because the Panthers didn't see the Lightning's power play with Bjorkstrand in the Stamkos spot, let's say. But I'm curious, assuming the Lightning get at least one power play tomorrow. I'm not saying that they're going to rearrange the players on the ice, but are they going to make Kucherov less of a point of focus? Because the Panthers are all over him. And as much as the Panthers have injuries, really the only guy, I mean, Kulikov might kill some penalties, but I'm not sure he's first over the boards. Really the one guy is Barkov, but they have other, their main penalty killers. Barkov is a main penalty killer. I'm not suggesting he isn't. They miss him in so many ways. But of the rest of the penalty killers, they're basically there. You know, Lundell, Luostarinen, Bennett will kill penalties. I mean, so, and Forsling. Forsling is the guy. Forsling is the left D, and he does a lot to disrupt what the Lightning want to do on that same side of the ice. So let's see if the Lightning, as they say in football, change the point of attack. Or shift the point of attack. Maybe it's more shots from the point. Maybe it's getting the puck to Bjorkstrand, just saying shoot. Shoot from the other side. Maybe not. Maybe they're going to be like, we want to do what we want to do. We just need to do it quicker. We'll see.
Well, and that's what Nikita Kucherov said, right? He said it at camp. He just had to execute under pressure better. And that's not easy to do.
They have a very aggressive kill. Florida.
Yeah, they're probably the most aggressive team in the league in terms of how they attack the puck on the penalty kill. They want to take away your time and space as quick as possible, even with one less player out there. But, you know, I think you've seen other teams sort of develop some sort of a similar approach in that, okay, if you're going to make a play, you're going to make a play. We're not going to let you make a play. We're going to force you to make a play. And a lot of times I think it's like if you want to call it playing the percentages, you know, you're probably going to get turnovers more often than you are somebody's going to make a play. And I think that's kind of the way that the Panthers have sort of approached with their PK. And obviously it's a strength of theirs, right? So, yeah, and making plays under pressure, it's one of those things where, yeah, it's easy to say, but let's see how well you can do it. And we're going to force you into it. And, you know, I think that's what the Panthers do very, very well. It's they have a lot of strengths on their team. I think the PK is certainly one of them.
What I will say, though, Eric, is, like, it's way easier from up top to kind of dissect all of this. There's no one right way or one wrong way to go about a system, and that includes penalty kill. So people will be like, well, everybody should be aggressive. Well, some teams don't want to be aggressive. Yep. There is a downside to being aggressive. Yes, you may disrupt more plays, but if you don't disrupt the play, you may be out of position. And one area where I think an aggressive kill can work against a penalty kill unit is when you get to those scramble plays, where you get to chaos in the low slot, a more, and I'll use this word, passive kill, where the players are not deviating from their kind of assigned spot on the ice. You are probably more likely to have your penalty killers set to try and handle a scramble play around the net. Aggressive kills, players are moving out of quote-unquote position, right? So, I mean, the Lightning beat Pittsburgh. This is going back a few years, but I know you remember the series well. With Guy Boucher, the Lightning beat the Pittsburgh Penguins in the first round of 2011 because they just created so many scramble plays around Marc-Andre Fleury that, you know, that worked very, very well for them. They were very, I mean, yes, Dominic Moore had some clean goals scored where, you know, him and Bergenheim executed the play behind the net. You can go back and watch it on YouTube. But a lot of the goals they scored that year in that series specifically, they just got a puck to the net, and it was like mad scramble, and who's going to get it? And Fleury's flopping around. And look, if you have an aggressive kill, your two defensemen may not be around the blue paint. They may be, you know, extending themselves to try and pressure the puck carrier. So what does it take to create a scramble play? A willingness to not make a play.
Yeah.
You're getting a puck to a dangerous area. Yeah, you're trying to score, but the first priority is let's get this below the hash marks and then battle. And we're making them very nervous because that puck is in a prime area, as opposed to pass, bobble the puck, pressure, stick in the way, down the ice. That's what we saw in the playoffs last year too often.
And that's
I don't know
probably...
but look, on the other hand, you have world-class players, and Kucherov is probably the very best in the NHL at doing this.
Yeah.
To break down aggressive kills with quick puck movement. That's the other way to go.
Yeah, and that's probably why Florida's so effective against the Lightning, is because they do like to make plays, right? They want to try and make plays. That's kind of the entire nature of their power play setup and their system and everything else.
The first unit, especially.
Yeah. So, it's like the immovable force versus the irresistible, whatever the saying is.
Object. I think that's where it goes.
And sometimes one of those wills has to come to fruition, and I think the Panthers have had more success at doing that because of the Lightning's penchant for wanting to make plays. But yeah, I remember very well that 11 playoff run.
The Lightning that was an improbable win because I think all the metrics favored Pittsburgh, but when the Lightning had a chance to get a puck to the net, and make a play and score a goal, they did it.
Yeah, and the saying was, get pucks to net, create chaos. That was a lot of their philosophy in that 2011. Their power play obviously was very good with Marc-Andre Bergeron bombing shots from the back and guys around the net, which is why, no power plays in Game 7 against Boston. It was like, well, wait a second. Wait, you just took one of the main strengths away from the Lightning, but I digress. That was a long time ago. I do want to get to a question here, and I don't think, Steve, I don't think we have any more, so I'll just go with this one from Bolt's Breakdown on X. Love to hear your thoughts on how you think Gage Gonsalves is playing. To me, he looks great. Tough. I do think he sometimes tries to make too pretty of a pass. Regardless, it's clear to me his vision and hockey IQ are excellent. Maybe just keep it simple. What do you see on Gage Gonsalves?
Up and down this year. Unfortunately for him, mostly down. I mean, he hasn't been abysmal, far from it. Otherwise, he probably would have been scratched. I don't think it's been that, but I don't think he has been as impactful as the Lightning were hoping he would be, or maybe he himself hoped he would be after a very, very strong second half of last season. And admittedly, in a playoff series where the Lightning were missing some guys, he may have been one of the Lightning's best players in that series against Florida. So you were hoping he would build on that. And with an odd exception here and there, he was very, very effective playing with James and Bjorkstrand in the win at Vegas. I thought they were the line that got the Lightning going in that game. There just haven't been enough games like that for him. Yeah. So he hasn't gotten the same amount of attention, say, as a point, because he doesn't have the profile of a point, but him kind of rediscovering the form that he showed for much of the second half of last year would certainly benefit the Lightning. That's my honest take on it.
Yeah, I think the one thing with Gage is, talk about trying to make plays. I think sometimes he's trying too hard to make plays, right? And then you look at the goal he scored. Mm-hmm. That was a hell of a shot.
He's got a great shot.
He's got a great shot.
Yeah,
that was his 8th shot of the season. Against Vegas. That's his 8th shot of the season. He needs to be, again, I hate using the word selfish, but just to kind of describe, he needs to use it more. He needs to unleash that shot on a more consistent basis instead of always trying to make plays. I think his stubbornness sometimes to not shoot the puck, I think, is holding him back. Right. I think that if he gets more shots on net with the type of shot that he does have, I don't think he realizes how good his shot is. Right. Like, I think that's just it. Sometimes players put themselves in their own mold, and sometimes they don't know how to break out of it. Right. And I think with Gage, I think that's part of it, is that he just needs to be in more of a shot mode to understand how good his shot is. Right. Like, I mean, we hear, your call on his first career goal coming in from breaks all the time. What a shot from Gage Gonsalves.
Yeah.
He has a great shot. He just needs to use it more often. Look, obviously he looks up and idolizes Nikita Kucherov. He's never been shy about saying that. But there's only one Nikita Kucherov. Like, you can't think that you're Nikita Kucherov all the time. He's capable of making plays. Don't get me wrong. He's a pretty good playmaker, and we saw that during his second half of last year when he was very involved in a lot of plays. But I think, again, it's backwards thinking. I think if he gets that shot on net more often and maybe start seeing some more goals, maybe then some more plays open up for him to make, right? Like, it's kind of that reverse style of thinking that, instead of if A then B, it's B then A, right? You kind of mentioned it there with the power play situation. So that's what I want to see out of Gage, is just shoot the puck on a more consistent basis, be more of a shot threat time to time, and maybe that opens up other parts of the game, because then you can make some of the plays. That's, again, Nikita Kucherov is one of a kind, but when he shoots the puck, and teams have to respect his shot because he does have a very good shot as well, sometimes that opens up more opportunities for him to make more plays. And I think I just want to see that from Gage. I just want to see him be more of a guy who wants to shoot the puck on a little bit more consistent basis, because I don't think he realizes how good a shot is.
And the last thing I'll add to that is, yes, I didn't realize that he'd only had 8 shots when the first puck went in for him at Vegas. Yeah. But I'm thinking back, like, what did he do last year in the second half that made him so valuable for the Lightning? And we talked about, like, Bjorkstrand's greatest strength is shooting the puck, so you want to shoot the puck. Gonçalves has a good shot, and I agree with you. I'd love to see him shoot the puck more. But what is really the strength of Gonçalves' game? Like, is he the sort of a player that could play on, we'll call it, the Gord line with Holmberg and Girgensons? He could do that. But what makes that line so effective is their relentless kind of puck pursuit and cycling, and they're very, very hard to play against. You want to do that if you're Gonçalves. But I think last year, not only was he winning his puck battles, he grabbed the conductor wand for a while. So, like, you referenced the comparison with Kucherov, he wasn't doing it like Kucherov does, but the puck was on his stick a lot. Yeah. And like, what is his greatest asset? There's a reason why he led Syracuse in scoring a couple of years ago with like 3 times the amount of assists as goals. Yes, he has a good shot and should shoot the puck more, but his greatest strength is his ability to control the puck and kind of set the table, if you will. Something we see from Point. Point is very, very good with the puck in his stick, usually. I mean, this year he's struggled. So I think we saw more of that from Gonçalves last year. He had the puck more. He doesn't have the puck a lot this year. If you don't have the puck, it's kind of hard to do all these other things, right? So, and I'm saying that because he's the sort of player who can have the puck a lot. I mean, there are certain players that the strength of their game lies in other areas, right? They have to play to your strength, whether it's forechecking or winning puck battles or shooting or, whatever it might be, being in sync with your line mates, coming clean out of your defensive zone. Like, all of these things are important. But I think for Gonçalves, what we saw last year was he just had the puck more. And he hasn't had the puck a lot this year. So hopefully that's something that he can correct. He has great vision. He has
great vision. Yeah. That's
he sees the ice. He knows where to go. He can slice through guys. So hopefully we start seeing more of that.
Yeah, and hopefully that goal the other night in Vegas kind of shakes his confidence loose a little bit, right? Like, gets him back to where we know that he's capable of getting to, because we saw it last year. So, All right.
Thanks for sitting in, Eric.
Yeah, thanks for having me on here for another hour. It's always great. The hour always seems to fly by very, very quickly. That always means, as Greg says, some great hockey talk. And we'll look forward to your call tomorrow night down in Sunrise, no matter what happens in that game.
Yes, and then I will see you in person for Sunday's home game against Vancouver.
Yep, very busy schedule coming up for the Lightning. We talked about that a little bit. And, of course, tomorrow's must-listen-to game on the Lightning Audio Network. It's a 5 o'clock scheduled puck drop down in Sunrise. That one should be a lot of fun. The pregame starts there at 4:30. Myself, Chief, and Ben Pierce will join Greg Linelli. Of course, Dave will have the call, and then me and Chief will be on the last call with Greg after the game, which hopefully we'll be talking about 2 very important points that the Lightning pick up, and who knows, whatever sort of other sideshows may or may not develop for tomorrow night's game, and that's why it makes it must listen to radio. So, Dave, thanks for having me, and we'll chat with you tomorrow.
All right, talk to you soon.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for us here on Lightning Power Lunch. Again, Lightning down in Sunrise tomorrow night, 5 o'clock puck drop. Back home on Sunday against the Vancouver Canucks, also a 5 o'clock puck drop as well. Thanks to Dave Mishkin for allowing me to sit in Greg Linelli's spot, for Steve Versnick keeping us online and in line. As usual, for Erik Erlendsson, I am Erik Erlendsson. You've been listening to Power Lunch. We'll see you again.